And we're back here, Philly's #1 college radio station, WHIP, getting ready for the Stanley Cup playoffs as the Rangers will face the Philadelphia Flyers at the world's most famous arena on Thursday at 7 p.m. Now let's go out to the hotline, and he's the man that covers the Rangers on a daily basis as he's a color analyst for the Rangers on MSG, and that's our good friend Joe Micheletti. Joe, it's Zach and Chase here in Philly. How are you?
Doing well, Zach. Chase, how are you guys doing?
Well, we're doing great. It's a little bit rainy here in Philadelphia right now, but we're getting ready for the highly anticipated series between the Broadway Blue Shirts as well as the Broad Street Bullies. And you look at this matchup, and we've seen it over the last 8 games. This has been the one that the Rangers have dominated at MSG, outscoring the Flyers by a score of 31-9 and winning 8 straight games. Why do the Flyers struggle at the world's most famous arena?
Hard to say, for sure, because I look at the Flyers and they're an excellent team, and for the Rangers, sometimes teams get the number of another team for whatever reason. But I think the thing to remember through all this, I look at that and I say, okay, from a Ranger standpoint, that's all well and good, but I think that it can be overplayed a little much, because when you get to the playoffs are just a different game. And the Rangers and the Flyers haven't played since '97, as everyone knows. And so, I take that, and maybe from a Ranger standpoint, they have some confidence as far as playing at home and having home ice advantage in that situation. But again, I will continue to stress that the playoffs, it's a different season. It's a different game. A lot goes on. Momentum swings happen quickly on both sides. And so from that standpoint, I, again, don't put as much emphasis on that particular statistic as other people.
No question that it's a new slate and anything can happen in the Stanley Cup playoffs. I look back to when the Flyers made a run to get to the finals where they lost to the Blackhawks. It was a 7-8 seed in the Eastern Conference Finals. So we've seen teams been able to go on runs that goes away from the traditional format. But you know it better than anyone. These players in the Flyers locker room constantly are getting asked the questions about the struggle in the world's most famous arena. Does that all get in a player's head, or is it just really a clean slate?
Well, I think what ends up happening is it becomes an issue until you solve the problem. And so until the Flyers win at MSG, those questions are going to remain. So for them, I'm sure they're talking about, hey, let's just get out in that first game and end this thing, and then the talk is over, and then you forget about it, and then home ice switches. And so I'm sure that that's probably their focus. And until that happens, it's going to remain a topic. They're going to have to answer questions regarding that topic, and they're going to have to overcome that, obviously, in order to win this series. So that's the other thing. If they can't overcome that problem winning at MSG, then they don't win the first series.
Hey, Joe, Chase Sr. here. When you played in the league, can you remember a mental block that you personally or the team had when they went up against a certain team at a particular venue where the puck just didn't bounce that team's way?
Well, the rivalry that I remember the most, and it was the one that St. Louis, when I was in St. Louis, that we had was against Chicago, and which makes that interesting. And here they are; those two teams are going to play in the first round, this year. But when I played, they did not play in United. They played in the old Chicago Stadium, which was a really difficult place to play. Similar to, I compare it to, prior to the Flyers, and was it Wachovia now? First Wachovia, whatever the new name.
Wells Fargo Center, yeah.
Right, when they played in the old building, that was similar to Chicago Stadium, where the fans are right on top of you. It feels like you're closed in. It was as difficult a place to play on the road as there was. So Chicago Stadium was similar, and it was just a difficult place to play, especially against a team that was about as good as you were. And if they were better, then it made it that much more difficult. So to me, that's the one I remember the most, of trying to get over, winning in Chicago Stadium, and under really trying circumstances. So that's the memory I have, and it's especially when you add to that the fact that you've got this rivalry that dates back so many years between the Flyers and the Rangers, that it becomes that much more difficult to win on the road.
The Flyers had a horrific start to the season. They fired Peter Laviolette after just 3 games into the season. Craig Berube comes in here and virtually helped overturn the culture, and the team responded to that and bought in, and Claude Giroux has been magnificent. How impressed have you been with the Flyers' turnaround? Because after that first month of the season, they had just a 4% chance of making the playoffs.
Yeah, I mean, it was still early, and I think you take that first month and you toss it to a certain extent if you can start turning things around. I said this the other night on the NBC Sportsnet game I was doing in Phoenix on Sunday night, that we got discussing the Coach of the Year candidates, and I brought up Craig Berube because I think he deserves votes. Whether he gets it or not, I think probably most people are leaning toward Patrick Waugh in Colorado because of that tremendous turnaround of that franchise and where they ended up, and I think he'll probably win. But I think Craig should get votes for this because I'm so impressed with the way that he walked into that situation. He had to make some changes as a head coach, but didn't have time to do it. Like in most situations where coaches get hired and they get a training camp, they get time to implement their system, they get to work on it. He did all this on the fly, and at the same time, he had to change an attitude of a team, and he had to change a system, and he had to, he wanted their conditioning to be better. So there were a lot of factors that Craig had to deal with, and for him to take this team, turn it around the way he has, I think he deserves so much credit and deserves certainly votes for Coach of the Year.
The Flyers are the only team in the NHL who have 7 players who have scored 20 or more goals this season, but it all starts and finishes with Claude Giroux. He puts up magnificent numbers, but when he's on the ice, he makes everyone better. What is so good about Claude Giroux?
Everything. Everything's great about him. I love the fact that he can do so many different things on the ice. He's not by any means a one-dimensional player. And I remember having a conversation with Craig Berube about Claude when he was finally able to turn things around. And I asked him, what did you do? What were your discussions like with him as far as trying to get his game back to where everyone expected it to be, including Claude? And he said a couple of things that he had him start doing. First of all, he had Claude started to play more aggressive. Just get more involved in the game, get a little bit more physical, which he can do. And that was number one. So get more involved in the game. And number two, and is something that he probably doesn't get enough credit for, is start shooting the puck. Because he can really shoot the puck. I mean, he's a wonderful distributor of the puck, but he's got a great shot as well. So, those two things, he had him start getting more involved in the game, and he had him start shooting the puck more, and then all of a sudden, we all started seeing the old Claude Giroux. And when that happened, and add the fact what Craig was doing with the team and the way they went, and they were able to really turn things around and became the team they are now. So with Giroux, you just have to watch him in every situation because he's such a quality player, one of the top players in the game.
We're spending a few minutes with Joe Micheletti, color analyst for the Rangers on MSG. And Joe, Lundqvist has been sensational this year. I know he struggled out of the gate, but he had a good Olympics. He's won gold in the past, has done a lot of things. But the big question with him is, can he get going in the Stanley Cup playoffs, and can he finally get to a Stanley Cup final? Does he at all feel a little pressure there? What's the feel up in New York with Hank?
Well, he's the type of player that you don't have to worry about him feeling pressure. He puts it on himself. I mean, this is a player that's as determined and hard worker and professional as there is in the game. And I've been around this game for a long, long time. I'm not sure I've seen a player work harder than Henrik Lundqvist on a day-by-day basis. And yes, he had a bad start to the season. There were a lot of factors going on, new coaching staff, his contract was an issue, and so these were distractions that he readily admits when he has these kinds of distractions, it affects his game. And so it took him 3 months to get going. But the last 3 months of the season, he's been absolutely spectacular, the type of goaltender that he was when he won the Vezina. And so his playoff record, I think he's played very, very well in the playoffs. You look at his record, and it's 30-37, I believe, in his career. But this is a guy that had back-to-back shutouts last year in games 6 and 7 to win the series against Washington. I think the factor for the Rangers over the previous years has been they've either dried up in the goal-scoring department in previous playoffs, or they've had some other issues. I don't think you point at losses by the Rangers and you point to the goaltender and say, boy, if he would have been better, they would have won. I don't think that's the case at all. I think he's played extremely well, and the win-loss record is not indicative of how good he's been.
I agree with you, because every year during the playoffs, and you know me, I'm a Rangers fan, and I feel like I tweet out every year, Hank is brilliant, but someone's got to find a way to put a puck in the back of the net. And Marty St. Louis was brought over in that trade when they swapped captain for captain right at the deadline, and he has only had one goal. He has about 7 or 8 assists. Why hasn't Marty St. Louis been able to put the puck in the back of the net?
I think it's pressure. I think, for one thing, and he's another player that puts an awful lot of pressure and takes so much responsibility for his role on a team. That's one thing. Second of all, it's a little different system, new teammates, getting used to doing all that. Has had an effect. He is being judged on a couple of other things. We'd all like him to score more goals, and he would like to do that as well. And I think he'll actually be more productive in the playoffs. But since the trade, the team is winning. And the other thing, part of that is that he is so effective in so many other areas of the game than just goal scoring. He's a very good defensive player. He's a smart player. He kills penalties. He plays on the power play. There's a lot of aspects of the game that Marty St. Louis participates in. And so, from that standpoint, he's been very good in so many other areas. And I think he's just been a little nervous, and sometimes he's indecisive when he gets the puck. And I mentioned this to him, and in all these years watching him, it always seemed that he was so decisive. When he got the puck, bang, he'd shoot it. And if he was in a good scoring position, even though he loves to pass. And I think he's just been a little hesitant at times, and at other times he's just simply missed.
We're spending a few minutes with Joe Micheletti. And Joe, switching gears back to the Flyers, Steve Mason in 2009, he won the Rookie of the Year award. He was nominated for the Vezina. Philly trades for him at the end of the season last year, and he impressed. But before the year, it was an open competition between him and Ray Emery, and his play has earned him a fat new contract. What has helped turn it around for Steve Mason? Because he's been rock solid throughout the year.
I think the credit always goes to the player. Mm-hmm. When you go through the struggles that he has after winning the Calder, and it wasn't just a short-term struggle, it was a long-term struggle for him, to the point where they were willing to move him. So I think you always give credit to the player, because it's one thing to have people say you should do this and try this and work on this and get advice from people, but it's always the player that has to not only physically get through it, but mentally you've got to figure out a way. And that's especially for a goaltender, more times than not, that's the most difficult thing to change, is that start believing again that you're good. Because players, when they lose their confidence, they start thinking, what kind of a player am I? Am I still a good player? Can I get it done? Am I going to be able to, am I going to be effective on a daily basis? And so goaltenders, they're even worse as far as that is concerned. So I think you start with the player first and give him credit for turning his game around. And I love Jeff Reese and what he brings as a goaltending coach. He's even keel. He's got a good rapport with goaltenders. He understands the position very well. So I think a combination is you get somebody that's really willing to get back to a level where they were earlier in their career, and then you've got somebody that can help kind of guide them on how to get there. And to me, that's a process that takes a little bit of time, and in Philadelphia, it's worked very well.
The Orange and Black have always been a tough team that thrives on physicality, and Wayne Simmons and Scott Hartnell are always willing to get dirty in front of the net and kind of get under the other team's skin. How important is it to have some players like that who don't necessarily make the flashy plays, but they get the job done and are tough players at the end of the day?
Well, in particular in the playoffs, it becomes more effective. The teams that you just look out west as an example, and Los Angeles and Anaheim, San Jose, St. Louis. They're all big grinding teams that seem to be, that seems to be. I don't want to say more effective, but it's a part of the game that adds to your repertoire of winning in the playoffs, because it is a tough grind for a couple of months. So you can't just have that. You've got to have, other parts of your game. You got to have goaltending. Obviously, you have to be able to defend. You can't just be physical and hit. If you're going to play that physical style like the Flyers have, they're one of the most penalized teams. So your penalty killing has to be good. And the case with Wayne Simmons, I love him. I love him as a player. I mean, tough. Will fight. Will do anything to win. But on top of that, he almost hit the 30-goal plateau. So, this is a player that you can use on the power play, and he's going to be tough. And every time you play against him, you just go, "Oh boy, here we go again." Bang, you're going to get hit, and then you got to deal with it. So, so to have those types of players in the playoffs gives you a better chance of advancing.
On the way out here with Joe Micheletti, Rangers get back a big piece in Ryan McDonagh, and he's just such a great player on the ice, so tough, always gets in front of pucks, and he's really one of the better defenders in the league. And I saw AV say the other day that it wouldn't surprise him if the Flyers go out there and finish up those checks. How healthy is McDonagh? Can he withstand some of those checks?
Yeah, he's ready to go. He really is. In fact, he told Alain Vigneault on Saturday in Montreal that he wanted to play that night, that he was ready to play. So, and Alain Vigneault just said, "Listen, it's the last game. Take a seat, rest, get ready for Thursday." So he is physically, he's been ready to go now for a number of days, and that's no different. That's no different than with anybody else. In particular, with the way the Flyers play. I mean, they don't pick their spots. I mean, if they're going to, play their game, part of playing their game is to be physical. And so they're not going to just target one player or two players. They know they've got to try and slow down a bunch of players on the Rangers, and the Rangers know how they play, and they're ready to respond to that type of style. So are they going to hit Ryan McDonagh if they get a chance? Yes. Are they going to go out of their way to hit him and take penalties? If they do that, then they might have an issue, and the series could be a short series if the Flyers are going to spend an awful lot of time in the penalty box. So I think they're going to try and do what they can, but go about it in a smart fashion. I would assume.
Final one here before we let you run as we're talking to Joe Micheletti. I look in the East, I would label Boston as the favorite. I love them to get back to the Stanley Cup Finals. Not too sure who's going to come out of the West. Do you have a Stanley Cup prediction?
I don't. I agree with you from the standpoint that Boston is the team to beat in the East. I don't think there's any question about that. In the West, you just look at the first round as an example. L.A. and San Jose in the first round. Chicago, St. Louis in the first round. There were plenty of people prior to the season that picked either of those four teams to win the Stanley Cup. So here you have two of the favorites to win the Stanley Cup that will be out of the playoffs in the first round. So, I like what LA did at the trade deadline. Adding Gabrick, and they were able to balance out their lines a little bit more. And of course, Jonathan Quick is terrific. But the defending champs, you know what? If they get, it looks like Taves and Kane will be back in the lineup. I still just think you have to side with them because of they know how to win, and those top players they can keep coming at you. So I think it's a toss up there, but I just wouldn't count out the champs.
Excellent stuff. We appreciate it, and I'm sure we'll see you here in Philadelphia for some of the games. Thanks so much, Joe.
You got it. Good to be with you guys. Take care.